is because there has always been a discussion about to what extent that you can improve a city's water supply through private sector participation. I think that there has been discussion in Hong Kong as well about what is the potential of PPP in water supply in Hong Kong. I think that some people are very supportive of this idea. There's also considerable resistance to this idea as well. But I think that this discussion is not going to go away, and it's always will at some point come back. It's also quite important that right now there's a policy shift within China as well in really promoting the water PPP in China. So you will see that perhaps in the next few years there will be more PPP arrangement within China. So I think that's quite important to understand what are potentials and pitfalls of PPP in water. This is the situation in Metro Manila when the water supply system was privatized in 1997. Right? So if you look at the water availability, 16 hours per day, water coverage is only 58.7%. So if you look at the challenge at the time, why the government decided to privatize it. The challenge is, the coverage is very low, so you want to expand the coverage, and the non-revenue water is also quite high. You want to reduce the non-revenue water efficiency that was also very low. Right? So those are reasons prompted the privatization at the time. Now, if you look at the comparison between Manila and Hong Kong at the time, right, this is 1997. I'm sure that the various indicators in Hong Kong today have much improved. But my understanding is that the non-revenue waters is actually still a significant concern. Right? I think in the morning we sort of saw some figures about probably somewhere around 16% still. I think this is still considerably higher than places like Singapore and Tokyo and so forth. So I think if you look at potential efficiency gain, that Hong Kong system that still potentially some efficiency gain to be made. Now let's look at the privatization arrangement in Manila. The reason give rise to the privatization, aside from the reason that I discussed also, is because of the water crisis at the time, 1995. And I want to point out several arrangements. I think that they can be of interest to a municipality that are interested in putting together privatization deals. One is that water tariff was increased by 38% in August of 1996. At that time, it was determined that the water system will be privatized, but they actually increased at that time, by 38%. Right? Later on, I'm going to show you why they actually increased dramatically, increased the tariff dramatically right before the privatization. And then the labor force in MWSS, which is the state-owned enterprise controlling the water sector in Manila, was reduced by 30%. And at that time, they decided to separate the city into two service zones, the west zone and the east zone. It was decided that no company can operate in entire areas in Manila. It has to be operated by two different companies. So that's why they actually divided the Metro Manila by two service areas, east and west. The reason at the time is that first is benchmarking. If you have two operators at a time instead of one, you can actually tell some story why one operator is more efficient than others. And other reasons include that if one operator fails, then the other operators can actually take its places, right? So there's various considerations for spreading the service area here. Now, if you look at the bids that submitted, one observation you will make is that the bids are extremely low. Right? Especially with the Eastone, the winning bid is 2.3 peso, and at that time, before the privatization, the prices charged by the state-owned enterprises is already over 8 peso. So basically, the bids is actually only 25% of what's charged by the state-owned company. Right? So at that time, it was perceived to be a big success of the privatization because the private company come in, they promise to deliver all this, cover 100% of the people by certain dates and deliver those 24-hour services, but with only 1/4 of the prices charged by the state-owned enterprises, which is, we know that typically there's a lot of subsidies involved, right? But of course, if you look at the winning bid, the Manila could have won both zones, but it was designed that no company can win both zones, so that although they're the lowest bidder for the West Zone as well, another companies signed the contract. Manila signed the contract in the West Zone. This is the according to the contractor agreement. This is what has been agreed. But if you look at the achievement today, right? This is from 1997. So this has been over 17 years. And if you look at the performances in water supply, they're very much in line with those targets. Of course, this is after multiple revision of the contract. Then today, if you look at today's figures, it relatively in line with. But if you look at sanitation and the sewage, this is still much lag behind in terms of what's stated in the contract. That's the reason why the contract has been revised twice, basically to reflect the reality that the private sector was not able to meet the target in sanitation and sewage. If you look at the prices, the price change, as I mentioned, in 1997, right after the private sector take over, if you look at the rate changes. In 1996, this is the price charged by the state-owned enterprises, MWSS. This is the price charged by the private sector, right? So this is a, biggest achievement here. But you look at what happened afterwards, right? In 2000, 2002, 2008, like after about roughly 10 years, the prices has changed, in Eastern Manila from 2.3 to 27 peso. Right? After you make adjustment on the consumer price index, this is equivalent to, this is 189 is compared with 1996, the prices charged by the state-owned enterprises. But if you compare with 2.3, this is actually significant increases. The price increases introduced after the privatization. So this is something to keep in mind because privatizations oftentimes was sold to the public that they can improve efficiencies so that they can lower prices. But if you look at what happened is that initially it did give you the impression that they are able to reduce price significantly, but eventually that the reality will catch up. And the two private sectors operators actually perform very differently. One company, Manila, actually was already bankrupt, and despite the higher prices they charged, in 2002 they actually changed the prices from 5 to 20 pesos here. So they've changed the prices quite aggressively. But despite the price changes, they were still operationally and financially unable to continue. So this company is actually bankrupt, and the new owners took over. And another company, Manila Waters, actually become one of the most successful companies in water industry. If you look at, if you go to various of international conferences and water convention and so forth, so oftentimes you hear the story about Manila Waters. And in fact, in 2005, the company was listed. Right? Imagine a company just get a 25 years contract from the government, and the company is listed in the stock market, and the stock market, their prices actually, is quite high. So they're doing, this company is doing very well, and also they have become regional players. These are various deals the company is working on. They are now operating in India, operating in Vietnam, and also operating in other places in the Philippines. Right? And in terms of non-revenue water, right, this is kind of indicative of what's explaining the divergence of the performance between the two concessionaires. One company is actually, Manila Water, the successful one, were able to reduce non-revenue water quite substantially. I think today its non-revenue water is about 16-17%. So it's much reduced from the time when the company took over. But the other company, the companies that bankrupted, actually at some point even increased the non-revenue waters. Now let me shift to the other side, the government side. Right? Because it was a concession contract, it's a contract between two parties. So at the beginning, the idea was that there was not much of a role for regulatory control, right? Because this is everything is specified in the contract in detail, how the price will change, how the various adjustments will be made, right? So that there's really not much room for a regulatory agency. But in this instance, they do have the regulators, the regulatory office. But the regulatory office is basically, if you look at the function mentioned at the time, when the concession stopped, implement agreement on rates, monitor information, reporting, and audit provision. Right? So this is quite a, it's not very extensive role for the regulatory office compared to other settings. If you look at the regulatory agencies in other settings like electricity and so forth, they are much more expensive role than this. But the problem is that the contracts with such a long duration, 25 years, is actually leave a lot of details unspecified. So when circumstances come up, you actually still need an agency to exercise some discretionary decision. So I just give you some example of the regulatory decision required at the March 1998, just right after the concession agreement was signed. Manila Water requests for an increase of tariff on the EPA crossing, which is that's sort of a debate whether or not that these kind of increases are allowed under the original contract. And Manila filed accessory to EPA because that they they suffer the negative consequences of Asian financial crisis. Again, this is also debatable to what extent that kind of accessory prices should be entertained under the original contract. Those are decisions that has to be made because the contract is really rather incomplete in specifying all these different situations. And also another one, contract extension. Manila Water filed a request to extend the contract for another 15 years. The reason was that the government of the Philippines actually implemented tougher environmental standards on river system. So that as a result, basically there was a much more extensive wastewater treatment is actually needed here. So the company just made a case that if you wanted to finance those expensive wastewater treatment, then you have to give the company more time, right? So extension of 15 years, so that the impact of the rate increases can be spread over a longer period. So those are all decisions need the attention from the regulatory agencies. Just to give you an example of this is the problem in the contract itself. This is actually is subject to international arbitration. Actually, if you look at the contract about how much return private sector can get, on the one sentence, this is actually in the same paragraph in the contract itself, in the same paragraph. And one paragraph said, in determining the appropriate discount rate, this is actually another word for return on their capitals. The regulatory office should apply conventional and international accepted methods, right? So this is should. And then this the regulatory office in its sole discretion may consider the concessionary rate of return either stated in or implied in the bid in determining the appropriate discount rate. So basically, one sentence saying that they should, according to some internationally accepted method, determine the rate of return. The other one basically saying that they should use whatever stated in their bids. Remember how low the bid is. They bid 2.3. At the time, the bid, in the bid they use a very, very low return. But the company argued they should use the internationally kind of acceptable method, which is over 9%. So you got this contract where in the one paragraph you got mentioned, so the company say we should basically looking at this paragraph, should apply. Then the regulatory office say, well, may consider it's a sole discretion, right? So basically there's a conflict here, and at the end of the international arbitration actually panel took the side of the concessionaire, so that actually give them a little water, a break essentially, that allow us to increase the rate rather substantially after these decisions. So these are the issues that really still require a lot of regulatory attention, and even when we believe that the concession agreement should specify in detail what's it's allowed or what's not allowed. This is actually reflects what is the biggest decision made by the regulatory agency is that in the first rate rebasing exercise, they actually look at the expenditure of the company, and they disallowed a lot of expenditures claimed by the company. Right? Basically, they say that these expenditures are not efficient. Like the company, to achieve certain things, the company could have spent monies differently, and the actual expenses actually can be much lower. So if you look at the disallowances, actually quite a substantial disallowances sort of implied, and then if you look at the disallowances for the manual, 8.45 billions. Basically, the company claimed that they spend this amount of money, but the regulatory agencies know that money should not be counted in the cost calculation, right? So this is a big decision. This is something that is never really specified well in the contract itself. That the regulatory agency would be able to exercise this kind of discretion. After the first rate rebasing exercise, the regulatory agency learned to become smarter, actually. So instead of scrutinize the concessionaire's performances every 5 years, they now moved to the system that they will look at the various performance indicators quarterly. Basically, that they've specified now over 20 different performance indicators, and then companies are expected to submit their report on those indicators on sort of regular basis. So at the end of the 5 years review process, there are not going to be big surprises, right? Because that based on the indicators that the concessionaire already, in a way, get certain approval of those expenditures that they made and the investment they made, and also the plan that they have. So this is basically that something that not included in the original contract at all. This is something that that they invented, and then they find that they have to basically use some new regulatory tool to cope with this requirement for regulatory decision. So if you read the website now, sort of how they explain the role of a regulatory agency, RO, this is very much different to evaluate and determine the reasonable water rates to be imposed by a concessionaire that will cover the necessary capital expenditure of the concessionaire for them to smoothly operate. So basically, if you look at today's, the regulatory agency has thought to become a real regulatory agency. It's very, very different from when the concession started. That the regulatory agency is just served as guardians of the contract itself. Right? So much expanded the regulatory rule. Some of the recent development, the reprivatization of Manila. I told you that the one company failed, the bankrupt, and the new owner took over. And after new owner took over, the performance has been great so far. Right? So they have been able to very aggressively reduce the non-revenue water, and the company is now also very profitable. Now they're making money. Another one is, like I mentioned before, the contract renewers. Right? They are able to make the cases to extend the contract for another 15 years. The most recent one is that as I were kind of going around to tell the sort of success story of Manila, as last year, they actually got into trouble with the regulatory agencies. That they submitted a request to the regulatory agencies to increase the rate by 28% gradually. But the regulatory agency not only disapproved that, and they actually asked them to reduce their rates. Right? So that's actually the big conflict between the two, and now this is under the again international arbitration panels. So this is the most development, and I can share you what sort of the one of the inside story. The reason is that in the I think in the 2010 after what they call very successful second rate review exercise, and the MWSS and the regulatory office actually decided to pay all their staff 23 months of bonus, because they say, we have a very successful rate review. Very successful rate review is based on the fact that whatever the concessionaire proposed, actually the regulator say, okay, no problem with it. Unlike the first one. So basically, because of that rate review exercise is very smooth, so they decided to give everyone 23 months of bonus, and that actually becomes scandal nationwide. So that the congressmen and so forth demanded to give answer. So they feel a bit, I guess, uneasy about this. So that they want to make the point that in the next time when the concessionaire do something, they would basically will show that they are not necessarily always sided with concessionaire. They always they also will be asking them to aggressively to reduce rate. I think that's be one of the reasons. Okay, some of the key lessons from the Manila water story. I think these are lessons might be of value to Hong Kong. One is the water PPP can potentially increase operation efficiency of a water utility. This is actually, if you look at the Manila water, they definitely have been able to increase the operational efficiency. Benchmarking essentially shows efficiency improvement after privatization. So there is a benchmarking tool can be used to safeguard the process. But also I think that the third point and the fourth point is worth noting. One is it's an illusion that PPP in water would reduce water tariff. At the beginning, it was an impression. This was how the privatization was sold to the general public. But it was an illusion in the Manila story. And also, I think if you look at worldwide experiences, this is probably an illusion elsewhere as well. And also, it's unlikely that water PPP would politicize the water issue. So the idea is that if you privatize it, then when you increase the water tariff, then people will say this is what the private sector is expected to do. But the problem is that even when private sector take over, the water issues never really get depoliticized. It's continued to be highly, sort of politically sensitive. So that's something to keep in mind. And private sector players are not born equal. Some would make more mistakes than others here. That's also important point because sometimes the argument for and against the privatization has been focused on ideological issues. Ideologically, whether or not PPP is a good idea, privatization is a good idea. But I think that I think the story in the PPP in Manila shows that you actually have to look at the detail. Who are the private sector player that you brought in? And if you brought in the right player, then the privatization might work quite well. But if you're not, then that's you might be in deeper trouble than where you started. So these are kind of various points. I think that as Hong Kong consider PPP as one of many options that we choose, these could be of interest. Thank you.